Well, this morning we had to farewell our littlest family member in our home, little Bubblegum the guinea pig. We watched her take her last breaths as we held her little body and stroked her little nose and her head and watched that life force that animates life within these bodies. We watched it disappear. And it's such an interesting thing, death, because you watch this life force sort of disappear, I guess, and you wonder, where does it go? Like, what happens? You know, one moment you have this pet, you beautiful, or your loved one, they're here, and the next minute, where do they go? They're gone, and it feels like a loss. They're no longer here. We no longer get to experience them. We no longer get to see them, to be with them in that expression. And all of that's real and true, you know. I watched the tear-stained face of my daughter as she grappled with the idea of missing little Bubblegum and no longer having her pet, you know, no longer getting to cuddle Bubblegum, no longer seeing Bubblegum run around and jump and be fun. It's sad and it's real, and that is the depth of love. It's the real depths of our hearts' grief, you know. It's a beautiful expression, in my opinion. Not always easy or comfortable, but still an expression of love nevertheless. And as I was watching my own daughter, I thought of myself at the same age when I lost my cat Murphy. She was run over after only 1 year, which is really, really young for a cat, and I was devastated, absolutely gutted. And I remember just, you know, that sense of trying to understand where our loved ones go, where our pets go, or, you know, what happens in death, and trying to contemplate this, you know, idea of you're here and you're not here within myself. And I used to get so confused, and I remember often thinking like of my own death as, say, like the light switching out, you know, like a big blackness, and that it would just be black all around. And that was scary, the idea of this, you know, black abyss and just sailing into the nothingness. That's what nothingness sort of represented to me. And I remember I would often say, the deep little child that I was, but, you know, that's still something. Like, black is still something. You know, when you close your eyelids, you can see that, you know that there's black there. But now that I'm a little older and wiser, and I reflected back on that, I realized that I was actually stumbling across a profound truth, the profound truth that death points us to. The idea that I was, you know, trying to grapple with what nothingness is, that you'd still be aware of nothingness. It's that awareness. The lights go out and that's it. Well, we can't understand that because what's left is awareness. There is that is life itself. That is the isness that I talk about. It's the, you know, it's the life force. It's that force that I was talking about that drained from little Bubblegum's eyes. It's the life force that animates everything on this planet, whether it be the trees, the birds, the different animals, us humans, you know, everything has this life force flowing through it to animate it and give it this life that we get to have here. And so when that disappears from the body, you know, we often make the mistake that, you know, it's the life that's gone, you know, the life of that person has disappeared. But really, we couldn't be further from the truth, because the life force just is. It always is. It always has been, and it always will be. It is. And that's why as a small girl, I couldn't understand it, because that isn't a possibility. You know, you can never not have that awareness. It's what holds everything. And I guess it's hard because we can't see it, we can't name it. You know, as a human, the human mind can't even quite conceptualize it, you know, this nothingness. And yet it's the force, it's the magic, it's the essence of everything. And really the body is just this temporary expression that gets put on top, or the mind, you know, and the life force animates it, and you get to have this experience, and beautiful. And so it's such a common misconception that, you know, when someone dies, that's the end of their life, but it's just the end of the body. The body just transitions, and the body recycles, everything. Just look out into nature. There's death everywhere. All the fallen leaves and animals, and it's part of this experience. And so whilst grief and sadness, when we lose someone, it's real, and we can honour that. Those emotions are there, and it's expanding our hearts in ways. It deepens our hearts. My daughter, whilst there was that sadness there, and my heart felt so deeply for her, I also knew that Bubblegum had gifted her this depth of growth and love that she didn't have before, and these memories that and having had a pet, it's just such a beautiful gift. So whilst when we open ourselves up to love, it is a vulnerable thing, because there's the possibility of that thing not always being there, and but then again, it's another beautiful lesson in teaching us non-attachment, to just enjoy the dance and flow of what comes in and out. It's a tricky lesson to grapple at 11 years old, and I honoured her sadness and where she was at yesterday. But as I reflect on my own journey, Bubblegum not being the first experience I've had of watching that life force flow away, it was the same thing when my son Jamie died. Just one minute he's there, and he's animated, and he's my boy, and I remember when the life force left his body, and really recognizing that it wasn't him anymore. It was a vessel, a beautiful, gorgeous, cute little vessel, but a vessel all the same. It wasn't his essence. And 15 years after his passing, I now know that he didn't go anywhere. If anything, he actually got closer. I feel him in so many ways. It's why I love nature, because he comes through in the birds and in the butterflies and all kinds of different signs and synchronicities. I've had children run up to me, called Jamie, and the mother's trying to get Jamie off of me, or synchronicities on his birthday, black cockatoos swooping, and even just in the guidance that I have received in my own life, and the direction that I've gone. He's running through me, and he's so close. I know he's there. I've even I've tapped into communication, and I've had conversations with him, and I can feel him. I know from my own knowingness. It's been a beautiful gift for me to step into this expansion of my family, beyond this physical realm. I'm sure there may be people out there that would call me crazy, and that's okay. You know what you know, and I know my experience, and I'm so grateful for what Jamie's gifted me, because my life has expanded in so many ways, and there have been so many blessings, and he's part of my spirit team now. He helps to guide, and he helps in me making the decisions, and in keeping my intentions in aligned with my heart and with my truth. And he's so deeply connected to that. He really brought me back to the truth of myself, of my awareness, of my isness, of the life force that is me, beyond my body and my mind. That was a very big one, being able to escape the grapples of my mind. He's come through in my music. Even the fact that I play music is all because of him. So many gifts beyond death, which so many can misperceive as the end. I really don't see death as the end. I see it as the beginning of something new, and a transition into greater expansion and growth, and a deepening, as I say, of our love and our hearts. So I honour the grief, and I honour those emotions, and all of that's real. We're human. It's normal to miss people, and to miss the experience of them, and to grieve that. And I still have my moments, but death offers no alternative. There's no other option. It's so final. You don't get to argue with death, which in some ways is quite freeing, because the dysfunctional human mind can argue with so many things and keep itself looping in suffering and stories, whereas death allows us to sort of step through the portal let go and release and birth into something new. The black cockatoos! At that very moment, they've just flown over my head, right over the top. Oh, hello. They are always the sign of Jamie. They have been since he died. Benny was writing the eulogy for his funeral, and 17 of them just came, sat and surrounded him. The moment he, finished this speech, this eulogy, the black cockatoos just up and left and swooped away. And ever since that moment, they have been very special. And we even have some of them breeding, the rare glossies that have got the red tails, because there's a yellow-tailed black cockatoo and a red tail, and the red-tailed black cockatoos are nesting out the front of our house, of course. So we've even had like the black cockatoo squad car like out the front looking for them, and they're talking to us, and it's Jamie, and I love that he wanted to show that sign to show the magic, because it is like magic. And death, whilst I acknowledge the sadness and the grief around it and all of that is absolutely real, it's also a portal into something really beautiful and profound, and it really helps us to come back to our truth, back to our center, remind us of who we are, where we came from, and also the fact that we are all in this together. Death reminds us of our connectedness as humans or as beings on this planet, that everything dies, we're all going to the same place. It's going to happen to us all. It's a humbling realization and a really good reminder of our sameness, of our oneness, that we're all the same. We're all in this same dance, and none of us get to escape this experience. And so, if anything, death can, bring us back to our connected humanity. And it can connect us back into our shared common ground, and that is that we're only here for a temporary time. We all feel pain, we all feel sorrow and grief. But one thing I have found is that death has actually been a portal into feeling more joy, because everything has its opposite. So to feel the depths of love, of grief, which can be uncomfortable, the other side of that is the heights of joy and love and bliss, and it all gets to be here, and it's all really one and the same thing anyway. I never thought I would feel gratitude about death and about losing a loved one, especially my son. Like, that was the worst thing imaginable. Whilst I'm not sitting here saying it was a great experience, it was all the hard things. It was terribly uncomfortable, but I'm super grateful for the experience and for the blessings and for the depth of growth it's given me. And we had this little frangipani tree that we bought not long before we had Jamie. And when he was a toddler, he used to know that he wasn't supposed to do this, but there were little white stones on the top of the pot, and he would go and he would steal the stones, and he'd be walking off, and he had this dump truck, and he'd put them in his dump truck, and we'd be saying, "Jamie, hey, did you take a stone?" And he'd be looking at us all cheekily, "Open your hand," and he'd open his hand, and sure enough, there'd be a few of those stones in there. And so after he died, Benny ended up putting some of his ashes into this frangipani tree, and we replanted into a bigger pot. It was so nice to have a physical object here that he had, touched, that he'd been a part of, that he had enjoyed when he'd been here for his physical experience. And since putting those ashes in that pot, the year afterwards, when it was time for flowering, now this tree had never flowered before. It was just these two stumps and occasional small little leaves had popped out. Well, the year after we put the ashes in, it flowered for the first time. That beauty and that life coming through this plant, and it was another expression. Not only was it another expression of Jamie, of his love, of his existence, of beauty and more things to be grateful for. It was an expression of abundance. It was an expression that it's not the end. There were so many expressions in this flower. And also just the idea that, everything's just recycled on this planet. It's all just, we're all just particles of matter made up of the stardust, and once again it brings us back into our sameness, into our oneness, that we're all just recycled particles and matter from here, made up of everything else that's come before us. We really are all ancestors if you look at it that way. And everything has an energy to it, you know, even the trees and different places you go in the world, you know, places where they've had heavy battles, you can feel it, you know, I can feel that in Britain, for example, or there's places, you know, different parts of the world where you can feel what the land holds because it's in the land and we are all part of that, you know. And death is just a beautiful transition into something else, something new. You know, we often hear the expression, it's a matter of life and death, you know, as if life is the opposite to death, either one or the other. But the opposite of death isn't life. The opposite of death is birth, you know. We birth into this physical experience and we have this temporary time, and death is the opposite of that. But life, there it doesn't have an opposite. Life is just life. Life force, whatever you want to call it, that's the awareness, it's the isness, it's the energy that's holding the whole thing, the whole experience. It's the power source, it's generating everything. And whilst my human mind and intellect can't quite explain it perfectly here, I can feel it. And the experience of death and being there in that moment as you watch that transformation is just a natural process and part of this life experience that we get to have here. And it's a beautiful transition, and it's a beautiful opportunity for us all to grow in love and in compassion and in kindness. So whilst I honour all that goes with death and all the emotions and the heartache and the pain, I also want to invite you to, if you haven't already, to look at death as a beautiful transformation and a rebirth, and to realise the truth that our loved ones don't go anywhere. In fact, if anything, they get closer. The black cockatoo just called. And it's like the lyrics of a song that I wrote for my son called Sleep Little One. At the end they state, I'm awake now, I see that you're closer than ever before to me while you sleep. And it's true, you know, my relationship with Jamie has continued to grow, and yes, it's different, it's changed, it's not the same as I have with my two kids that are here in physical form, but it didn't end. If anything, he is extending me beyond this life, beyond this realm, into more of myself, into more truth, into more knowing. And as a result, I was able to come into the truth of who I am, an understanding and a knowing, which has brought me to true self-compassion and love and joy. So what a blessing. What a blessing that is. So if you are navigating death, losing a loved one, or missing them, or grappling with the idea of your own death, my heart is with you. I'm sending you love and compassion and understanding. I invite you into remembering that this is not the end. In fact, sometimes it's just the beginning.
And I'm awake now. I see that you're closer than ever before to me. While you sleep, little one, sleep.